Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Sound Design Experiments, and in today's episode I'm going to be doing a breakdown of my Embers of Mirrim sound redesign. So first I'll play you the full clip with my audio, and then get into how I created the sounds. Okay, so I began by adding these character sounds. And then the atmosphere track, so I layered these two ambiences that I found on SoundSnap. I then started to break down the different sounds I wanted to create. Most of the movements are repeated throughout the clip, so the main ones I wanted to capture were when the creature turns into the ember, is floating in the ember, and when it's launched in the air. So this was the sound I created for when the creature turns into the ember. I wanted this part to have a slight glitchy sound to it, as well as a calmer ring, so I layered up two mechanical sounds. The first one sounded like this originally. I then shifted up the pitch a little using Soundtoy's Alterboy plugin. I added a chorus effect, and also boosted the high end a little to make the sound a bit more crisp. The second mechanical sound originally sounded like this. And after shifting up the frequency, and also adding a chorus effect, the result was this. For the ring part of the sound, I used a wine glass being hit and faded out the impact at the beginning. I then duplicated this and had one at a higher and one at a lower frequency. I then realised that there was a small explosion after the ember appears, as you can see here. So for this sound, I used a recording I captured of ice in a glass, which originally sounded like this. I then reversed it and shifted up the frequency. So altogether that section sounded like this. Next I worked on the sounds for when the character is floating in the ember. I wanted a shimmering sound to match the animation, and also I wanted to fill out the frequency spectrum to get some highs and lows in there. So I started off with this layer, which was the drone-like sound that I found from SoundSnap. I then pitch shifted it up to make it sound like this. I then found this glass ringing sound to cover the higher end of the frequency spectrum. However, I wanted it to be a bit less constant, so I copied this layer, pitch shifted the sound even higher, and added the Soundtoy's Crystallizer Delay plugin. I played around with the parameters in the plugin to get the kind of delay that I wanted, and then I made it output only the delayed signal. By then adding some reverb, and again only sending out the wet signal, this gave the shimmering effect that I was looking for. I wanted to add a layer that sat around the middle of the frequency spectrum, as it still sounded a little bit thin, so I used a different glass ringing sound to fill the gap. So here's that sound all together. Okay, so next I made the sounds for the bouncing pads. So I first added a short reversed plop sound as the character got sucked into the pad. This originally sounded like this, but once reversed, sounded like this. I left that sound as it was with no effects and layered up a glitch sound. I then duplicated this with one being higher and one being lower in frequency. And I then added the same chorus effect to both tracks using the Snap Heat plugin. On top of this, I layered another wine glass ring, which I used a lot in this redesign to cover the higher frequencies. I layered this water bottle plopping sound on top. I used the Native Instruments Phases plugin to add some variation to the sound. And I also pitch shifted this down. I then duplicated this, pitch shifting the sound higher, while also changing the phases settings slightly to work better with the higher frequencies. Now, as you might have noticed, I also added a pitch plugin on the ringing sound as well, and this is because after posting the clip on Twitter, I got some feedback to try varying the pitch of the bouncing pad. So I gave that a go by automating the pitch for all 3 of these pitch plugins. I think it sounds a lot better and it gives more variation to the sound. There are just 2 more layers to this sound, and one of those is a whoosh sound as the creature gets ejected. For this sound, I added a ring modulator and the Filter Freak plugin by Soundtoys. With this plugin, you can control 2 filters that rise a certain amount in frequency depending on the threshold you set. For the last layer of this sound, I wanted to add a variation of static sounds, as when the creature is ejected, you see some sparks come off of the pad. So here's that layer of the sound all together. Okay, so here's that section of the clip with all of the sounds that I've just explained. I then moved on to the last section of the clip when the creature splits off into 2 embers and collects these orbs. So I used the same drone sounds for when the embers are floating, however I added 1 extra airy layer as both embers are now being controlled. Now for the collection of the orb, I duplicated these 2 top layers and pitch shifted them differently, 1 layer for the green orbs and 1 for the purple. So for the first layer of the sound, I used the water bottle plopping sound I used in the earlier section. However, I faded the front of the audio file to take away the impact sound to make it sound like this. To vary the sound, I again added the Phases plugin, and I also pitch shifted the sound up by 12 semitones. The second layer was a recording I did of a key being pulled out of a lock. It gave this slight mechanical sound, which I thought fit perfectly layered with the bottle sound effect. I shifted up the frequency and added some EQ to boost the high end. As I said before, I duplicated these sounds and had them at different pitches to act as the different coloured orbs, so I'll play those 4 layers for you now. The last small sound effect was when the embers connect again, so to create this I reused a few of the layers from the bouncing pad. The final layers that I added were for the orange electric wall that can be seen here. And to make this I used a layer of an engine sparking and mixed this with a spacey drone. But I felt like they didn't really stick together, so I used sidechaining to have the amplitude of the Spark audio file affect the gain of the drone using the Snapheat plugin. I then added some EQ to lower some of the loud frequencies and used panning and volume automation to make it fit the picture. So those were all the sounds I layered to make this piece. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Sound Design Experiments. If you have any feedback or suggestions for this series, then let me know in the comments below or send me a tweet on Twitter. See you in the next one.